Hey, 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 what's going on? There's gonna be another uh there's gonna be another lesson where I don't show my face. I was just getting a message about the internet not working too well. Hopefully that's gone. Hopefully everything's all right. So we have 14 it's kind of back again. Uh we have 14 new words. I would think that these are some of the more difficult ones we've had before. Because they're all kind of science related, sort of. So we'll go right down through the list here. Um, yeah, some you might know. There are a few that you will know, like different forms of them. So hopefully they won't be too bad for you, but feel free to study them. And of course, eventually fill out the graphic organizers that will help you understand these words a little bit more. And then we're going to read the article, the brain. So that will help. All right, the first one is pronounced assimilate. Assimilate. You can see it says to absorb fully, to adopt as one's own, to adapt fully. So if you look at that picture, there are a couple different ways you can use assimilate in science, but you could use it with social aspects too, and sometimes in a negative way. So you can see Chinese, Irish, it looks like maybe Italian, Mexican, Russian. So some people, some Americans, and I'm not saying that this is right. In fact, it's probably wrong. But when immigrants come from another country, some Americans expect for them to assimilate fully. And when you absorb them fully, they lose their identity of where they came from. Now, I think in Mr. Bim's class, you will be studying some of the hardships that Native Americans had to go through excuse me, early on, I guess during, like, let's say the Jackson administration. I mean, it was more than just that, but there were schools designed by European Americans to assimilate Native Americans. So they would go to these schools, they would live there, they would be forced to give up their traditions, have their hair cut, dress in more Western style clothing, not their traditional style. So assimilate can be a bad thing, but it can also be used in silent science where now I'm not a scientist and this might not be exactly right, but think about Kool-Aid. If you've ever made that powdered Kool-Aid, or if you've ever put sugar into hot water, it basically assimilates. Like it's hard for you to see the sugar once it's dissolved, for the most part. That's more of a assimilation. In a minute, we're going to talk about integrate, which I have trouble saying, or integration. And that this is where things are. Let's just talk about this one now. So, assimilate is when like two things are combined, but one of those things is lost. Okay. This is when two things come together and they don't lose themselves. They work together, okay, to make a whole. And you can see those puzzle pieces. It's the opposite of segregate, integrate. Okay. Segregate, if we talk about in this class, separate schools depending on your race. Integrate, that would mean races come together in the same school. Okay. So anytime something is integrated, it's combined and it doesn't lose itself. Tendency, a likelihood of behaving in a certain way. So I have a tendency to want to stay in bed when I'm sick. You might have a tendency to stay up a little too late. It's just you are likely to behave in a certain way. You tend to do something. Tendency. We have a tendency to call off school when it snows. Okay. I hope that helps there. Observation, that's a noun. You can make an observation. Observe is the verb. This one's pretty straightforward. You see that person right there? It is observing this giant grasshopper, which is a little scary. But so the act of noticing and describing events or processes in a careful, orderly way. So in science, you probably make observations during labs. You study things carefully. Uh, excuse me. You might have an observation at a future job. That's where your boss will come in and watch you work, watch you do your job. Hopefully, you do well. Now, documentation. You might have heard of like documents. Um, Documents could be a bill of sale for a house or a car. You might have a passport or a driver's license. But documentation is right here. It's the description of a behavior, of the behavior of a command or function library. So this person is documenting what they see. Okay. You can also document something, write it down. Kind of goes along with observation. So you might document what you see in a science lab by writing it down, by typing out some notes. You're documenting it. Involuntary. You can't stop doing it. Excuse me. Voluntary, you do it of your own will. You are able to choose to do it or not do it. If it is involuntary, you can't help but do it. I don't know if I've coughed in this during this lesson or not, but uh sometimes I can't help it but cough. This person is yawning. When you see another person yawn, it's often involuntary. You can't stop it. Your heart beating, that's just involuntarily moving right now. You can't stop it. Neurologist. Neurologist is the next one. Doctor who studies the brain and nervous system. Every time I hear neuro, I think brain. So somebody who studies the brain. Excuse me. And synapses. We are going to read about these in the brain article, I think tomorrow. Tiny gaps that fire to make the brain work. So we usually use that verb there, fire, some synapses. So anytime you like lean down to pick something up, your brain is sending messages down your spinal cord and other parts of your body to make those parts of your body move. Uh, and They are fired by synapses. We'll also talk about neurons. That's not one of our words, but it is in the article. Neurons, and synapses work together. Excuse me. Subconsciousness. We have. Sorry, yeah, I'm not feeling so well, so I'm a little off my game here. Subconsciousness or your subconscious. We have talked about this in a couple other classes. I don't know if every one we've talked about, so let me explain it here. What you are thinking is your consciousness. You're actively thinking about it. Like right now, you might be thinking about how you want to leave this class. But if something is in your subconscious, the way I think of it, it's in the back of your brain. You are not aware that you are thinking about it. Let's say somebody has had some sort of trauma. It's very possible, maybe as a kid, some trauma as a kid. And when they get to be an adult, that trauma has been buried somewhere in their brain, and we might say that it is in their subconscious. It's still there, They haven't forgotten about it. Well, it's kind of like they have forgotten about it, but it's buried somewhere in their brain and it still affects them without even knowing it. Okay? They're not fully aware. I hope that helps. Suspicion, that's the noun. Suspicious is the adjective. Maybe you've heard that. It's a feeling of doubt or mistrust. Maybe your parents often have a suspicion about you. They don't trust you. Despised is another way to say hated. Probably a little worse than hated. Despise. That's pretty clear right there. I hate this guy. This guy despises that guy. Few more here. We can do it. Deterioration. Sometimes you might hear deteriorate. That's the verb. Deteriorate. The process of becoming worse. And if you look at that building, is that a building right there? It's deteriorating. Um, at one time, it was probably a nice structure, but over time, has become worse. My voice throughout this lesson is deteriorating. It is not as strong as it was at the beginning of this lesson. Introspection. This is looking inside yourself for thoughts or feelings. Intro, think inside. Spect, that means to look. Anytime you see spect, think look. Spectator, spectacles. So this is evaluating yourself. Like if something goes wrong in your life, look inward. Is there something you could have done to make it better? That would be introspection. And then regression. Careful, it's a little different from deterioration, but it's similar in the fact that going back to something that was worse in some way. So let's say you were lifting weights and you were working out and you were becoming stronger. Your heart is getting stronger, heart's a muscle, but it's getting better. When you stop working out, you'll probably regress. You'll probably experience some sort of regression going back. A lot of times, if people have trouble, like some trauma, we'll go back to the trauma, as an adult, they might regress back towards, childlike state. Let's say that trauma, they've been getting better, like they have been doing better. Then something sets them back. We would say that they're probably having a regression. All right, this is not my best work. Sorry, the COVID. Hopefully, you know a little bit more than you did before this lesson. All right, see ya.